Welcome everybody to the 2021 NAMSA annual meeting. My name is Scott Taylor and I'm the chair of the organization. With me today is Seth Brown, our executive director, and Randy Neprash, our vice chair. Thanks for joining us. This broadcast is being recorded and will be available later for viewing on the NAMSA website. I'll just give a quick second for Seth and Randy to introduce themselves.
Go ahead, Randy.
Thanks, Seth. I'm Randy Neprash. I am calling in from Roseville, Minnesota, just north of St. Paul. I am the staff of the Minnesota Cities Stormwater Coalition, work for Stantec Consulting, and I'm the vice chair of NAMSA. Thrilled to have everybody here. Thanks.
Thanks, Randy. And then I'm Seth Brown. I'm the executive director of NAMSA, and I'm located in the Washington, D.C. area. Also, if there's any problems or any hiccups and you have my contact information, feel free to contact me throughout this event if there's any issues. I'll try to address that. So I'll be kind of emceeing throughout this this event. So let me know if there's any issues or whatnot.
All right. Thanks a lot, you guys. We've got a great program for you today, and we're going to move pretty crisply through it. Hopefully, there'll be a little bit of time for some Q&A. As always, I think you can use the chat function to interact with any of the panelists. So go ahead and use that as we move along. So I'm going to turn it over to Seth now to just do some quick housekeeping stuff.
Okay. Thanks, Scott. Yeah, Scott's already covered some of this. This, as is mentioned, this webcast is being recorded, and it will be posted not to our website. Well, it could be to our website, but we have a YouTube channel, and the link is shown there, and we'll provide that link when we send out information afterwards. Also, a PDF of the slides will be made available. We'll have to clear that with all the all the folks who are making presentations, but there'll at least be slides of the basic information we're showing here. There are PDHs available. If you need PDHs, just let me know. Send me an email that you see on the screen here. And as Scott mentioned, attendees can only ask questions through the question function. If you've got problems with technical stuff, either use the chat function or contact me through text or email. But we do hope to have questions. We're trying to, we have a lot of ground to cover, a lot of speakers, so we don't have a ton of time. But if you ask questions, we can try to, if we don't have time to get them answered right now, we can try to get those that feedback after the fact as well. So don't hesitate to type in your questions on that. And again, if you have any technical issues, use the chat function. I think that covers all the housekeeping. If there's any questions, feel free to chat or again, contact me in some other way. Or if you're having problems, let us know. As I mentioned, we got a lot of speakers today. We got 2 hours here, which is a little bit long, but this takes the place of our usual annual conference, which we would have at WEFTEC, which would be about 2 hours long. And we try to, this is our opportunity to just share with everybody what we've been doing, what some of our state members have been doing, and then also provide a forum for our EPA friends to share information that they've got going on, their priorities, and field some questions as well. So you see all the names there under EPA on the left side there. We have Lisa Biddle, Rachel Urban will not be able to make it, unfortunately, today, but Robin DeYoung and Heather Goss, all in the Office of Wastewater Management with the Office of Wetlands, Oceans, and Waterway, Wetlands, Oceans, and Watersheds. We have Ramel Nandi, who's going to talk about trash-free waters. We've got Dave Smith, who's going to talk about the Water Reuse Action Plan, focusing on stormwater and out of Region 9, and the Office of Research and Development, that's Kristen Pelletieri. And then first we're going to hear from Jamie Houle with the UNH Stormwater Center to hear what's going on in New Hampshire. There, as a state member, we've got Susan Strong from Fort Collins, Colorado, talking about what's going on with the Colorado Stormwater Council. Then we'll have Shannon Freed and Steve Dye. Shannon's with Senator Ben Cardin's office, was somebody we worked with a lot. on the bipartisan infrastructure bill, and then Steve, of course, has been key. Many of you know him. He's key to making this all happen on that side. And then we'll hear from James Stitt, who's the manager of sustainability with the Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Authority, to talk about how they've been addressing resilience and sustainability there in the stormwater context. I just want to quickly thank all the speakers for being available, and I also want to recognize, I mean, a big part of what we're talking about here is the bipartisan infrastructure bill was signed into law last Friday, and we're going to get a chance to hear more about that a little bit later on. But I just want to recognize this is a watershed moment, no pun intended, for our sector, and there's a lot of folks who are behind that. I think NAMSA did a lot, Scott, and Randy, and countless others. The Water Environment Federation, Steve Dye is the #1, I think, person, and Shannon and others on the Senate and House staff side were very instrumental too, and of course WEF and the Stormwater Institute as well, and others. But we just want to recognize and pause and recognize the significance of that. So anyway, with that said, I think we should move along. If you're ready to go, Scott.
Yep. All right, so this next slide is kind of an overview of our agenda today. We've got, I'm going to kind of go over some of the things that NAMSA has been doing, and as Seth noted, we have a couple of speakers that are going to report out for us. Then we're going to go to the EPA reports, and we have 2 great guest speakers, and actually 3, and that's when we're going to go over the bipartisan infrastructure bill as well, and then wrap up and hopefully get to some of your questions. So we'll move kind of crisply through this stuff at first, hopefully get the interactive portion of this going. So the next slide, please. Just really quickly, for those of you that don't know who or what is NAMSA, the National Municipal Stormwater Alliance. We have the nationalstormwateralliance.org domain on the web where you can find out a lot more about us, but really NAMSA was formed to have a unified voice for the MS4 community, specifically on stormwater program and stormwater issues. So that's really what we've focused on, is working proactively. I think that the stormwater program in general has done a great job of being reactive, but we're trying to inject a little bit more proactive effort into improving the stormwater program while also reducing the implementation cost. So you can see some of the other things we got there. Stormwater as a resource. Public image is a big thing too. Really, our vision for the organization is to work at things that need to be done at a national level. Those are things like public education and raising the awareness of stormwater so that everybody across the country can be successful in advocating for their program and getting the funding it needs. Looking at things like source control, which is difficult to do piecemeal across the US, but rightly should come kind of from the national level, source control of pollutants. And then of course, program funding. That's a big part of what we're going to be talking about today, but a lot of money can flow from the federal government down to the states, and NAMSA is really working hard on that to increase the awareness of stormwater, and then the funding then that would go along with that. So the next slide. You can see here right now we have 24 groups that are members of NAMSA. We're looking to try to get a state level organization in every state that is dedicated to stormwater. We think that's really important in terms of being able to advocate back up to Washington and be able to have a voice for your state on the national platform. But so we're about halfway there in terms of NAMSA members. I think there's a few more organizations than that out there. The rest of the states haven't formed state stormwater programs yet. We do have 3 individual members that you see there represented by the stars. These are individual MS4 members in Washington, D.C., Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and Thurston County, Washington. We recently changed the NAMSA bylaws to allow individual MS4s to join. And then we have our affiliate members, which are really kind of in 2 categories at this point. We have affiliate members and then members of STEP. And if we can have the next slide, please. I just wanted to quickly note our affiliate members. These are supporters of NAMSA, and they include Second Nature, Kleinfelder, Civil and Environmental Consultants, ABTEC, CBI Systems, Stantec, P4 Infrastructure, Hugo New, the National Stormwater Center, Opti RTC, BB&K, that's Best and Krieger, Michael Baker International, Bernstein Inframarker, and the National Stormwater Center. So thank you to all of our affiliate members. They really do help us make things like this possible. And then next is our NAMSA STEP affiliate members. And for those of you who are not aware, STEP, the Standard Testing and Evaluation for Practices and Products, was recently migrated over to NAMSA from WEF to continue in the STEP mission, which is to put together a national testing protocol for BMPs. And Seth is running that, and he's assembled a group that is funding moving that forward into the next level. And those are the people that you see here: ABTEC, EnvironPod, Herrera, Lane, Oldcastle, Contec, Stormtrap, Hydro International, Ferguson, ADS, BioClean, Forterra, Sanitation District Number 1 of Northern Kentucky, and the Capital Region Watershed District in St. Paul, Minnesota. So thanks to everybody that stepped up to fund STEP, and that's something that's going to be moving ahead quite quickly in the next year under Seth's leadership. And contact Seth if you want to get on the mailing list for when those meetings occur, and help move that project along. All right, let's go to the next slide. Talk just briefly about some of the things that NAMSA has been working on. We have really 4 focus areas that we've outlined in our strategic plan, which is sector support and information, policy and advocacy, communication, and education. So we've been moving initiatives forward in each of those kind of 4 areas, and I'll just touch on those briefly. If we could have the next slide. In sector support, really what we've focused on in 2021 is a couple of things, and it's to get more funding to local stormwater programs. So I think everybody's familiar with the state revolving fund. Our Vice Chair, Randy Neprash, did an excellent analysis of how much money really goes to stormwater programs through the 50 state SRFs. And we found that it was really in the single-digit percentages, and that included with the Green Project Reserve. So that's something that we're working with EPA on to try to boost the visibility of stormwater in the SRF. And you know, we realize that part of the issue there is that these are loans instead of grants in a lot of cases. So we're working again to try to get more money on the grant level through the SRF for stormwater instead of just loans. And the other thing, you know, I would mention on this slide too is STEP. We have put together a specific site on our website, the NAMSA website, where you can go and track the STEP activities. Again, this national testing protocol is something that we're going to be moving ahead. Probably eventually will come into an entity of its own once it's launched, but which we hope to have done within the next couple of years. But it's exciting times on that. Things are going to be moving forward, so please check out our website and the STEP page, the Center for Excellence for STEP, if you are interested in looking at that more. On policy and advocacy, really this year we've been focused on, no surprise, the bipartisan infrastructure funding package, and that was something that just got signed a couple days ago, as everybody noticed, or as everybody is aware, I'm sure. And you're going to hear a lot more about that today. But as Seth already kind of alluded to, really worked very hard to get stormwater into that. I think it's something that we didn't see stormwater appearing too often in some of the early drafts of that bill, but we're very pleased with how it came out and the amount of money that's there for stormwater and just water in general in the final signed legislation. So that was, I think, work well done, and we'll hear again more about that today. You can see some of the other things we're working on there under regulation and policy with the EPA. In terms of communication and messaging, I think, I talked a little bit about how we need to raise the profile of stormwater, and this is something that was very successful. We partnered with the Water Environment Federation and the American Society of Civil Engineers to get stormwater as its own category in the ASCE National Infrastructure Report Card. That came out this year. Stormwater is its own category, got a D+, I think, as I recall. But this is huge for the stormwater sector, so that people understand that it's one of the fundamental utilities that you need for a properly functioning urban system. And already I believe it was this morning, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal which talked about and mentioned the lack of funding for stormwater in the ASCE Infrastructure Report Card. So it's just a huge step forward. It really was not included. It was buried in the other categories, if it was included at all, stormwater, prior to this year's report card. So this is a major step forward and something that NAMSA was working on your behalf, and I think something that we will all benefit from going forward. Now, my last area in education, we partnered with Region 9 of the EPA to put together an online MS4 resource. This is something that is on our website now. It came online about March of this year, and it's really excellent. It's kind of geared for the phase 2s that don't have a lot of resources and staff, but not entirely, because it really functions as a kind of a curated list of some of the latest studies and information on all sorts of the programs, the major portions of the programs, the minimum control measures for implementing a stormwater program. So if you're phase 2 really just kind of spooling up, or a phase 1 that's been at this for many, many years, I think you'll find this as a very useful online resource, because you can quickly go to some of the best and most important studies and guidance manuals and things that will help you with a specific issue that you have. It's well organized, and I encourage you to take a look. It's again on the NAMSA website. So I think that's all I wanted to say about kind of what we've been doing at NAMSA. Obviously, take a look at our website if you want to see all the other issues, and happy to answer any questions at the end. But want to move right ahead now and onto our NAMSA report out. So Seth, if you could introduce those speakers.
Yeah, we've got 2 speakers. I mean, again, going back to kind of the background for NAMSA, for those who aren't familiar, we've got 24 state groups that are part of, that are members of our organization. We'd love to feature all of them, but obviously we don't have time to do that at this point in time. When we have our regular membership calls, we try to feature 1 or 2 each time we do that, so that others can hear what's going on in other states and other regions or other countries. So we've got 2 today. Jamie Houle, who's with the UNH Stormwater Center, and Susan Strong, she's with the City of Fort Collins, and she's representing the Colorado Stormwater Council. So Jamie, if you want to turn your webcam on, and there you go. You said you're going to do some interpretive dance for us, so I'm expecting some moves at this point. And you gotta unmute yourself too if you're muted. I don't know if you are or not, but
yeah, I think I did. Yeah, no presentation, but I just wanted to report out on a recent initiative that we started, and that is to update. We convened an expert panel to review the literature and update our credits with respect to leaf collection or street sweeping. Randy is also on the technical advisory committee, and they're helping to shape the boundaries of what the expert panel will actually explore. And that the first question that the expert panel, which we convened the first panel just this week, and the first question that they're tackling is right now much of our sweeping credit is tied and inextricably linked with leaf collection. And a lot of the sweeping credits historically, if you look across the country, focus a lot on sediment. So when you start to delve into the literature of sweeping and sweeping credits, you quickly fall into assessments of soil types, particle size distributions, and the different sediment or pollutant affinity of those different fractions. So sweeping gets very, very tied into the actual sediments. And what we're trying to do is really assess the organics and possibly look at organic collection separately or differently than sweeping. So certainly we're not getting rid of the sweeping credit. We want to keep that, but we want to build out and improve the, we feel like, as do many, I think, in this industry, feel like municipalities are not getting due credit for the great work that they're doing on the organic collection process that they're implementing. And so we're really lucky to have Randy. He's already tapped into a lot of the resources that Minnesota is generating as we speak. And we also have national experts on the technical, on the expert panel as well. So yeah, I think, I'm not sure that I have anything else. I guess the one thing I'll say is a great outcome and deliverable from this process is just a vast accumulation of the literature that's out there. And so our regional EPA office, Region 1, a year ago convened Tetra Tech to put together a literature review. And I believe, Randy, you have access to that. We will be providing it, but right now we're trying to round it out. Bill Selbig, who's also on our expert panel, just released a really good article that kind of delves into this conundrum of the organics versus the sediment. Randy, I don't think that literature review it's certainly not anything. I mean, it's publicly available, and so if you wanted to make that, if you want to somehow put that on the NAMSA website, I mean, that would be great. It's a ton of information and a really good start, if you're trying to assemble the literature that's out there. So we have a literature review for street sweeping, and again, once you delve into it, you'll know what I'm talking about, how it quickly kind of moves into particle size distribution and kind of the characteristics of sediment and road grit. And then we have one on leaf collection, which again accumulates the information that is out there on pickup of organic debris. So I was told like 5 minutes, and that's, I think that's it in a nutshell. I would say, we hope to wrap this up by next April and, have a definitive answer. And again, what we're trying to do is move the whole, we're trying to not reinvent the wheel, and we're trying to build on the great work of others, including Minnesota and Wisconsin, and try to push the whole industry forward.
That's great, Jamie. And Bill Selbig's with USGS, correct?
Correct, in Wisconsin.
Yeah, and I know that there's significant loads, nutrient loads that are associated with leaves, right? So that's part of this crediting. So I think that what you're finding could be used by others. So like you're leveraging others, but others could leverage your work too when you're done, which is great.
Absolutely, and yeah, we really hope to make more of a national conversation. So one of the next really critical conversations is, how is that credit assessed? And so we're in New England, a lot of it is done by modeling. And so we're assuming different pollutant export rates for different land uses. And in Minnesota has just started to do a more measured approach. So Randy put us into contact with Dr. Mike Trojan. I believe, I forget, he's in Minnesota. Randy will know who he works for. It's escaping my mind right now.
Pollution Control Agency. Yeah, he's the regulator, right? Yep.
There you go. And so he's been really forthcoming, and we're talking about the Minnesota approach, which is very new, and we just want to characterize that well for our experts, so we can hopefully, again, move everybody in the same direction.
That's great, Jamie. And again, that's part of what NAMSA wants to do, is make national conversations from what's going on at the state level and spread that. So I appreciate you sharing that information. So thanks for the report out on that. Yep, thank you. And then, and for those who don't know, Jamie's he's the director of the UNH Stormwater Center. So we've got Susan Strong. I've got your slides up here, Susan, with the Colorado Stormwater Council. And you're with the city of Fort Collins, right? So if you want to take it away from here.
Yes, thanks, Seth. I just created a few slides to give people something else to look at besides me and my construction project. But anyways, yes, I'm representing the Colorado Stormwater Council today. And if you just want to go forward, Seth, I just wanted to say a little bit very briefly, if you want to change slides, about the council. We represent 83, if my numbers are correct, local governments and organizations, and we currently have 8 committees, working on the same things everybody else is doing. It's really hard to keep your sites focused on the end goal, protecting water quality. There's a lot of, with the permit requirements, as you know, but we form committees to help permittees, and we act as a forum, much like NAMSA is doing. For all of these things, we have a lot of resources on our website, provide trainings, etc. So next slide. Like I said, very briefly about us. And I'll wait for the slide to change. There we go. Impactful activities in Colorado that the Stormwater Council is involved in. We have new committees for 2022, TMDLs and post-construction. The TMDL came about because we are getting a lot of E. coli TMDLs right now, or in the near future, and how are the permittees going to manage the new requirements that are in our permits? Fort Collins is coming up very soon. Anyway, so it's important for us to develop compliance tools for permittees and coordinate. And then our post-construction committee, the newly renewed, the small MS4 non-standard phase 2 permit was renewed with a lot more post-construction requirements that are, they really weren't, most of them, prepared to implement. So again, we're trying to develop compliance tools and checklists and work with these permittees and work through the Colorado State University Stormwater Center, who is a great resource for training. And then, so they have a full work plan for 2022. See, I put a lot of stuff in here, so I got to talk fast. But anyway, our legislative committee is following the PFAS and the WOTUS updates, topics, and long-standing member Alan Searcy has been nominated for the EPA Regional Roundtable for the Southwest region. We're really hoping he is appointed. Colorado Stormwater Council is somewhat notorious for contesting Colorado permit language, MS4 permit language, that does not resemble other states or EPA permits and might be much more prescriptive. Really what we want to do is still protect water quality, but making these requirements achievable for our permittees. So we have provided legal assistance on that. That's still in the process right now. In addition, Colorado Springs MS4 permit has been public noticed, and comments are due very soon. So we're reviewing and commenting that as an organization. Strength in numbers, I guess. And then last but not least, we have convened a monitoring work group, very small. It's got a consultant on there and a couple of folks who are engaging in discussions with the state regarding past and planned future monitoring. Again, even these non-standard school districts now have some monitoring requirements that they are figuring out how to comply with, amongst everything else. So we're discussing with the state, how are they using that data? Because we want to make it we want it to be useful. If we're spending our resources and these small communities are spending their resources doing this monitoring, you know, where they may not have those resources, or maybe larger communities that have hundreds of outfalls. It's just, it's kind of daunting, as you all know. But those are the things that how we're, Colorado Stormwater Council is trying to help our members. And that's about it. I just put a couple of links on the next slide. If anybody wants to check out the public-facing Stormwater Council page, or there's an email address for our admin committee if you have any specific questions or want information.
Excellent.
So it's on the next slide.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Oh, that was it. Yeah, no, there's a little bit of a delay, I think. So it's up there. It's up there.
Yeah.
I think you've had some internet challenges you were talking about, right? So it's a little bit slow.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, I'm down to 2 bars now.
The joy of working from home. I understand.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Susan. That's great. And again, if there's any questions that anyone has on any of this, you can let me know or contact folks directly. And if you send them to me, I can send them along to folks in an appropriate way. So thanks again, Susan, appreciate that. And we're gonna be moving along
Thanks for having me.
Yep, thank you. And then we're gonna be moving along to our EPA portion of our meeting here. And we're gonna start with Lisa Biddle. And I guess all the EPA folks can turn on your cameras and get ready to talk as you'd like to. But Lisa, go for it. If you just want to kick things off and give a little bit of background and, you know, who you guys are working with and what you're doing, that'd be great.
Thank you, Seth. My name is Lisa Biddle, and thanks to Seth and NAMSA for inviting us to join you today. I'm the branch chief of our municipal branch within the Office of Water Permits Division. And our focus in that branch is on wet weather permitting topics. I'm also joined by 2 colleagues, Heather Goss and Robin DeYoung from the branch, who will introduce themselves and talk about their work in a moment. Our stormwater program lead, Rachel Urban, could not join us today, so I'm going to give some updates from her group, then I'll pass it on to Heather. But before I dive in, I did want to acknowledge a couple of questions Seth raised of interest to this group, but aren't really in the lane of my branch, and we don't have a lot of updates on, but one of them was the bipartisan infrastructure law, and you know, it's really very soon, and we don't have any official updates on that yet. But I know Seth is in touch with Michael Dean from our SRF program, and his team's been running point on a lot of the near-term actions there. And so I'm sure hopefully you can check in with him soon, and we'll have more of an update in the weeks to come. And then the other question Seth raised was the Environmental Finance Advisory Board's report on stormwater funding. And that's led out of our WRFIC group. Ellen Tarquinio and Sonia Brubaker have the lead on that effort. And they did let me know that the report has not been transmitted to Congress yet, but they think that, you know, we're very close to that happening, and that they'll send out an announcement when that does happen. So moving on to some work in our branch, we've been working with communities on a few things. Right now we're putting final touches on a collection of communication tools for communities called Stormwater Smart. That public works managers, program managers, MS4s can use to promote the value of sound stormwater management for creating a community where people want to live and work. So those materials will support the outreach and education component of MS4 programs. And this was an effort NAMSA really advocated that MS4s needed resources on, and we're really excited to get the materials into your hands and hear some feedback on how they can be used. So stay tuned for that. We're going through like our final review process, so I'm hoping that we'll be getting those into your hands in this winter. The next thing I'll mention quickly is we've talked to you in the past on our long-term stormwater planning effort. Under the integrated planning umbrella, we set out to do some work with some communities that wanted to focus more discreetly on long-term planning for stormwater management rather than the typical integrated planning that covers wastewater and stormwater. So we're in the process of wrapping up that technical assistance. And early next year, we're targeting to share some resources that are part of that. Some of the main topics that we're focused on were asset management, financing and funding, suitability of sites for improved stormwater management, and green infrastructure in roadway projects. And so we'll get some tools, some worksheets, resources up on our website, also a revised guide that I think you all provided some input on, and we'll look forward to sharing those with you. The next thing I'll mention is there's this large suite of fact sheets called the Menu of BMP fact sheets that were first released by EPA in the year 2000, and they really target the 6 minimum control measures and phase 2 permits, and even provides examples of the sorts of practices that can be implemented as part of an MS4 program. And we've been updating the information and practices and examples on those documents, and we will be rolling those back up onto our website. They've been down for a while due to some compatibility issues, so they'll be going live, I think, starting this December, so starting next month. And pivoting to another topic, as you're likely aware, the universe of regulated small MS4s is based on the Census Bureau's definition of urbanized area. And I just want to acknowledge that we're tracking this with the most recent census. The Bureau actually proposed to eliminate the definition of urbanized area. And we're in touch with them and trying to track what's happening there, and continuing to think about what next steps might look like depending on where they go with that. And lastly, we have 2 general permits for stormwater in areas where EPA is the permitting authority rather than the states. We have an industrial stormwater permit and then the construction stormwater general permit. And I just wanted to mention that the construction general permit is in like the final stages to process it for reissuance. That permit expires in February, and so we took public comment on it this past spring, and we're working on revisions, and we're on track to get that final permit through and made public by that deadline of expiration. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Heather. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Lisa. My name is Heather Goss. I serve as EPA's National Transportation Liaison to the U.S. Department of Transportation's Federal Highway Administration. This cooperative federal position helps facilitate engagement between the 2 agencies and assist DOTs in achieving their stormwater management and other environmental goals. So I just want to talk briefly about one topic that we're looking at currently, which is relevant to transportation MS4s, but also to MS4s more broadly, and that is offsite stormwater management. Offsite stormwater management provides project developers with the option to meet MS4 performance standards for management of post-construction stormwater at a location other than the project site under certain conditions. So for example, this could be outside the right-of-way of an infrastructure project, at another location in the community, or in the same watershed instead of on-site. So in some cases, opportunities to limit stormwater impacts within the existing right-of-way can be challenging, due to dense urban development, rocky or steep sites, utility conflicts, or contaminated soil. And in addition, stormwater management practices that were installed years ago in the right-of-way just may not have been designed to adequately meet the more recent water quality requirements. So in such cases, providing offsite opportunities to manage stormwater may be an appealing strategy to ensure that local improvements in stormwater management within a watershed can still occur. So various communities across the US have found that these offsite programs provide opportunities to implement stormwater controls in areas that are not currently undergoing development. So that can also lead to additional environmental and community benefits. And in some cases, it may be more cost effective, more efficient, and more effective than solely on-site stormwater management. So the stormwater regulations provide flexibility to allow such offsite programs. And we want stakeholders to be aware of the offsite stormwater management as a tool for permit compliance in certain situations. We think that offsite stormwater management can play a complementary role in integrated planning, also including long-term stormwater planning, and it can be part of a broader plan to prioritize the most effective actions to achieve water quality goals in a community. So recently we've met with many groups to listen to their perspectives on offsite stormwater management, so including NAMSA, also representatives from states, other governmental groups for local governments, industry groups, environmental groups. And these discussions have helped us better understand what are some of the opportunities, needs, and concerns and resource gaps related to this topic. So stay tuned, and we're still learning more, and glad to hear from folks on this topic. And I'll also just mention really briefly by way of another transportation update. In 2021, EPA hosted 3 webinars related to transportation stormwater, all of which are now archived on our website. So one was on the transportation MS4 permit compendium, one was on EPA's new Green Streets Handbook, and the last one was on the Copper-Free Brake Partnership initiative. So I'm going to turn it over to Robin DeYoung. Thank you.
Thanks, Heather. And Robin, we just have a couple minutes, so I'm not trying to cut you cut you short, but just want to make sure that we try to stay on schedule because we got a lot of
Oh,
speakers.
sure, no problem. I'm gonna time myself, so I'll. Got it. Hi everyone, I am Robin DeYoung. I'm currently the Green Infrastructure Program Lead, and I'm also leading integrated planning in the Office of Water. And I have two green infrastructure updates. One is that we reestablished a federal green infrastructure collaborative where there's 10 federal agencies working together to build capacity for planning, designing, maintaining, and measuring green infrastructure and nature-based solutions. We're working together to promote multiple benefits of green infrastructure, encourage the equitable implementation to adapt to climate impacts. And one of the first things that we did was on November 2nd, we launched our first webinar together, and it was navigating federal funding for green infrastructure, where we had 28 funding and technical assistance programs all presented by 7 federal agencies in 1.5 hours, and we had breakout sessions. And so those slides are available right now on our website, and I have the link that I just sent over to the organizers and panelists for you guys to share. And we also have an MS4 green infrastructure. So the second update for green infrastructure is we have a MS4 green infrastructure compendium that should be out early next year that looks at a national perspective of phase 1 and phase 2 MS4 permits that have included green infrastructure that are clear, specific, and measurable. And there's going to be 23 permits as well as implementation examples included in that compendium. The integrated planning side, I have about 20 more seconds. So wanted to let you guys know that we do have a new fact sheet coming out on how to fund the development of an integrated stormwater wastewater plan. We're piloting a toolkit with state permitting authorities to help them collaborate, inform, and incorporate integrated plans and permits. And we'll be doing pilot with some states in Aqua soon. If there's any states who are interested in piloting it with us, let me know. And it's very important, last thing, we have free technical assistance available today until September 2022. So please, if you're interested, go to our integrated planning NPDS website. The EFCs, Environmental Finance Centers, are providing free technical assistance to assess affordability, alternatives for your integrated plan, look at viable funding strategies, review schedules, or even just get started. And I can also put that in the chat.
Excellent.
250.
Thanks. Yeah, perfect. Now, thanks, Robin, and thanks to Lisa and Heather. I do want to recognize, Lisa, you were acting for a while, but now you are in a permanent position there, heading up the stormwater group. So that's great. Congratulations on that. Just wanted to recognize that. So thanks for taking the time. There's been a couple of questions about whether the slides and information we're talking about here is going to be made available. You guys don't have to commit to that, but I mean, we'll try to take and compile as much information on these links and whatnot as we can and report out on that. So just so folks know, we're doing everything we can. And I just, as I get the slides ready for Dave Smith to share his thoughts, I just wanted to mention that one of the reasons that we like to do this is we want folks to see what's going on at EPA and all the value. Robin, you just talked about the fact that there's technical assistance available. We want to make sure that folks know about this. So EPA is not just seen as as a negative thing, as the bad guy in the room, but actually is providing a lot of support. So folks may not hear that as much, and we wanted to make sure that that was something that folks were aware of. So anyway, thanks again, Lisa and Heather and Robin. And Dave Smith, you want to take it away from
Sure.
here?
I'll take it away from there. And Seth, we love you guys too. We really do. But actually, I mean that. I wanted to, before I start, I just wanted to say we really liked the opportunity to partner with NAMSA on what I'm going to talk to you about, but also some other projects, including the MS4 Resource that Scott mentioned earlier, and on some other things. So we really think NAMSA has been a great partner, and we've been very grateful for that.
Thank you, Dave.
Today, I'm Dave Smith, and I'm an assistant water director for EPA's Pacific Southwest region. And, I have a day job, but today I'm going to kind of talk about a lot of the work I've been doing over the last 2 years related to water recycling and reuse. And as EPA partnered with a bunch of other federal agencies, along with a bunch of other state and local folks interested in water management, there's a lot of interest in developing a national water reuse action plan. And in the process of developing that plan, it was clear we need to pay attention to the potential for stormwater harvesting, for stormwater capture and use. And so we were able to put together one action, number 3.3, which specifically addresses stormwater capture and use. And after consulting with a bunch of folks on this, we determined that we kind of need to understand better what do people think our key opportunities are, our key challenges, and kind of plot what can we do going forward to build local capacity to harvest stormwater safely and effectively, and to make that fit within your broader context of stormwater management. We worked nicely over the last year and a half with a bunch of great partners, including NAMSA, the Renew-It Engineering Research Consortium, Water Environment Federation, and Water Reuse. So next slide, please, Seth. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what we've done over that last year and a half under this action. And if you're interested in seeing more details on what we've done, you can Google the Water Reuse Action Plan, and on our online platform, there's detailed information about what we've been doing, along with some of the outputs that we've been producing. We did a series of 4 webcasts over the last year, one that was co-hosted by NAMSA that focused on some of the key issues that were on people's minds regarding stormwater harvesting. What are the big motivations and drivers that people have in mind around stormwater capture and use? What do we do about setting treatment standards that are appropriate for different uses that harvested stormwater can be put to? We wanted to showcase some really great multi-benefit stormwater harvesting projects that have been implemented around the country, and how communities were able to put together projects that yield co-benefits along with protecting water quality. And then we did another one where we honed in at a more technical level on specific methods for calculating and evaluating different kinds of benefits that stormwater management practices and projects can have. We also put on a technical meeting where we really honed in on methods for estimating the potential to capture and use stormwater. And I'll talk about that in a moment. And this all led up to a national convening that we did in September at the Johnson Foundation at Wingspread facility in Wisconsin. Next slide, please. By the way, that's a picture of us at Wingspread showing that it is possible to do in-person meetings. So yeah, and you'll see Seth over there on the right-hand side. He was there.
I'm right there.
Okay. Lot of what did we find? Widespread interest in stormwater capture and use across the U.S. But the drivers for people's interest in this, it really varied a lot across the country. And to oversimplify, in the wetter areas, people were more interested in harvesting stormwater to help tackle water quality and flood control challenges. Whereas in the drier parts of the country, greater interest in harvesting stormwater to augment water supply and increase the resilience of their water supply systems. We also did some work with help from NAMSA to compare stormwater capture potential with wastewater recycling potential and see how those two compare to water use in urban areas in the US. And what we found is there's probably as much or more potential to capture and use urban stormwater as there is potential to recycle urban wastewater. And that together, that could supply more than enough water to supply all urban water use in the United States. There's huge untapped potential here. We also found that it seems to be key to frame stormwater management projects and stormwater harvesting projects that really emphasize the multiple benefits that they can provide. Just trying to do a sales pitch on these based on water supply benefits often does not pencil out as a really cost-effective solution. But when you add in the other kinds of benefits these projects can realize, they can look very attractive. And so we've got a lot of potential here if we can only overcome some of the challenges that we have. Next slide, please. So in the webcast and in the meeting that we had in Wingspread, and that's a picture of us actually working at Wingspread, we focused in really 5 major areas, kind of 6. And these reflected what people were telling us are the most significant challenges they have in mind when they think about pursuing stormwater harvesting. By far, number 1 is money. And we're hoping we have big opportunities with the passage of the bipartisan bill and potentially the Build Back Better bill to put a lot more money to work on recycling projects overall, but particularly to promote multi-objective stormwater management and harvesting projects. There's a lot of concern about how regulation affects our ability to pursue stormwater capture. But there was also a view that there's potential there, that we're seeing that permitting really can incentivize investments in stormwater harvesting, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a barrier in the way of it. But we spent a lot of time talking about that. Clearly, there are a lot of remaining needs for additional science, research, monitoring to better understand what's in stormwater and how it needs to be treated and controlled to ensure that if it's reused, it's done safely. Related to that, there's a lot of interest in technology development and validation, and a lot of interest in investing in things like STEP, which enable us to objectively review and validate new technologies to ease their implementation in projects across the country. Also very important are what people are seeing about how tough it is to communicate effectively. Well, first, just about the benefits of stormwater management overall, but also about how stormwater harvesting can be done safely and effectively and be a really integral part of how communities manage stormwater and how that those projects can yield multiple benefits that the communities really believe in. Finally, these kinds of projects require a lot of coordination across a lot of jurisdictions, agencies, some of which are not in the habit of working with each other. So we spent a fair amount of time talking about how can we better support interagency collaboration around these kinds of projects. Next slide, please. So what are we going to do with this? The webcasts that we did are posted if you care to spend a few hours checking those out. We did short technical meeting summaries of each webcast and that technical meeting that I mentioned. And you can see all those at the Water Reuse Action Plan website. We are in the process of preparing a report coming out of the Wingspread meeting that we did in September, and we're hoping to issue it end of 21, maybe early 22. I'm hoping 21 because I'm actually retiring at the end of December. So you can cast your bets now. I do think that we're going to be spending some energy amplifying the results of these efforts and some of the findings and recommendations that have come out of them in national meetings taking place in 2022. We are preparing and are going to be using a stormwater capture and use research strategy to try to inform how we spend some money that's being made available in partnership with ORD, our Office of Research and Development, that will in part support investments in research to look at different kinds of recycling, including stormwater harvesting. And then most important, we're working with a variety of organizations, including NAMSA and others, to follow up on the recommendations from the report and from the webcasts, and to try to influence thinking about how we can take advantage of some of these new funding opportunities, perhaps develop and issue additional policy or guidance kinds of things in areas that were of interest and concern, and overall just find ways to invest in the things that the participants have believed will add the most value in building local capacity to pursue stormwater harvesting. So I appreciate that several of you who are on here have been active in some of these conversations. And I'll just leave you with the idea. I was astonished by the high level of interest in stormwater harvesting that we heard over this last 2 years. So I think that there's big opportunities here. And, you know, I'll just say we're really fighting hard to make sure that stormwater is kind of at the grown-ups table when we're talking about opportunities to make the best use of stormwater and our water resources in urban areas, and that it be looked at favorably in comparison with wastewater recycling opportunities going forward. So I'll stop there and appreciate the time to talk with you.
Well, thanks, Dave. And what you said is exactly what our mission is, to try to get stormwater at the big kids table or the adults table or whatever you want to call it. So we appreciate any effort to do anything like that. And you know, there was a question here about whether or not we could share the links here to what we're talking about here. I just wanted folks to know that we will be doing that when we send an email out afterwards. We will make sure that we'll populate as many links as possible with all the stuff we're talking about with these webinars that have been done. Some of them we have on our YouTube site, and some of them are on the EPA site, I believe, and other places. So just so folks know, if you don't see the links now, we will be following up with everybody with a lot of information. So don't feel like you're missing out on that. So thanks again, Dave. And we've got Ramel, Nandi, and then we've got Chris and Pelletier, the next two EPA folks for us. And don't feel like you have to rush. We built in a little extra time, so don't feel like you have to rush everything, Ramel and Chris. So Ramel, if you want to move forward and take it from here.
All right, thank you, Seth. I'm actually glad you said that, because I was about to say, I know we're behind schedule and I'm probably not going to help you get back on schedule. So maybe Chris can do that. But thank you, everyone. I'm the National Program Lead for EPA's Trash-Free Waters Program. I'm going to present on some recent work by the program. The bread and butter of what Trash-Free Waters does is actually our place-based trash mitigation work, mainly led by our regional offices. But for today, I'm going to focus more on the tools and resources that our program has developed recently or is in the process of developing. Next slide. So the Stormwater Solid Waste Dialogues project was brought to the Trash-Free Waters program by the partners you see in that last bullet, including NAMSA via our friend Seth, who felt that municipal stormwater and solid waste programs could benefit from learning about how to more effectively address the trash and waterways issue. We've had 2 dialogues with municipalities and others so far to talk about the challenges and opportunities in this space. And we'll be doing a summary of the dialogues themselves as a learning tool to other communities, a list of useful resources to address the challenges identified during the dialogues, and the project partners ourselves will initiate between 2 to 4 new projects to address the barriers identified during the dialogues. We'll be having our 3rd dialogue on December 15th. Among other things, we'll be talking about how our project ideas with the stakeholders and get some input on those ideas. And hopefully we see some of you there. Next slide, please. You know what strikes me? I'm in the Trash-Free Waters program, so I have so many slides with trash in them. And I think I got to start thinking outside of the box and have less slides with trash. Like you see slide after slide of trash. It's what I think about a lot, but it's got to be tiring in the presentations.
Are you having an existential crisis in front of us right now?
It struck me. It's like, here's yet another picture of trash. Anyway, the trash stormwater permit compendium was released in April and posted to our website. We decided to create this document after doing some engagement with stakeholders. Stormwater is the primary nexus for trash getting into waterways, and so we wanted to address that nexus. As you all know, stormwater permits are an enforceable mechanism for addressing trash pollution through stormwater programs. So we wanted to provide stormwater permit writers primarily, but also municipal stormwater planners, watershed planners, and others with information so that they can write effective trash provisions into their stormwater permits, stormwater management plans, and the like. And by the way, thanks to those NAMSA members who provided input during the drafting of this document. Next slide, please. The DC Curbside Disposal Project is a pilot project that Trash Free Waters partnered with Washington, DC on to address the problem of unintentional spillage on trash collection days. That's a significant problem in many communities, and in DC you have a huge rat problem, so it makes it that much worse. We use the decal you see on the slide and asked residents in target neighborhoods in DC to put the decals on their garbage can lids to give them a point of contact reminder on simple behaviors that can help reduce unintentional spillage. At the end of the campaign, we did see a statistically significant difference between target and control neighborhoods in terms of spillage and target behaviors. So we'll do a case study on the project and post it on our website and do some outreach to other municipalities in case they want to try to replicate what we did. And we're also exploring with DC whether we can roll out the campaign citywide. Next slide, please. Our Escape Trash Assessment Protocol, or ETAP, was also published in April. The genesis for this protocol was that some of our stakeholders had conveyed that the current trash assessment methodologies they had come across did not help them as much as they would have liked with coming up with tailored management interventions upstream. So we decided to create a more detailed trash characterization protocol. We hope that this will also be potentially useful to help inform state trash impaired water body listings and also to inform stormwater permit provisions and stormwater management plans. We'll have an app version of ETAP available in the near future. We already know we're going to be using the existing marine debris tracker app for that. I didn't do a slide on this, but we also recently released a beach microplastics citizen science protocol as well, so you can look for that on our website. Next slide, please. In terms of outreach activities, we write and distribute The Flow, our long-standing program newsletter, which contains articles on a number of trash-related efforts and topics. The Rapids is a monthly communication that provides timely information on upcoming events, funding opportunities, news items, and research. We also have a quarterly webinar series through which we try to have some degree of focus on what stakeholders themselves can do to help mitigate the problem of aquatic trash. The next one will be on January 20th and revolve around lessons learned from source reduction outreach campaigns. There are also a number of outreach activities I didn't put on the slide, such as our article series, project highlights, and more. Next slide, please. Some of you may be familiar with the Save Our Seas 2.0 Act, which was signed into law last December and which has many equities for EPA. Section 301 of that act calls for EPA to develop a post-consumer materials management and water management strategy. We'll likely choose a different name for the final strategy. It's sort of a long and awkward name. The strategy will pose challenges to address the problem of trash in waterways and the oceans and articulate objectives with actions to address those challenges. It's important to note that the strategy, consistent with what the Act calls for, will not just encapsulate what EPA itself is directly involved in to address the aquatic trash issue, but also reflect the wider breadth of domestic stakeholder efforts on this front, including states and municipalities. We expect to have a draft strategy available for public comment this spring. Next slide. Seth, maybe I'll give you a break a little bit on these last two slides. I'll just say about this, this is also a report on microfiber pollution that we're doing pursuant to Save Our Seas 2.0. It's going to include a federal action plan on reducing microfiber pollution, and we will have that out late next year. Next slide. And finally, we are next week actually going to be posting this microplastics expert workshop progress report. So we had done a report back in 2017, sort of talking about the state of the science and remaining research gaps on microplastics research. After talking to a number of people, we decided it was a right time to do a progress report because there's been an explosion in microplastics research since 2017. So again, we will be looking at state of the science and remaining research gaps and presenting at a number of conferences, et cetera, and that should be up next week. Final slide. And that's my contact information and our homepage. So always welcome input from anyone or questions or comments or opportunities to partner. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
More pictures of trash, Ramel. I'm sorry. I just wanted thanks Ramel. I wanted everyone to know that we've been, again, this is another group that NAMSA has been engaged with to talk about the issue of stormwater and trash among the many things that Ramel has been covering here, and we will be having, as Ramel mentioned, we're going to be having another webinar, and that's set for December 15th from 1:30 to 3 p.m. That is Eastern time. Again, a link for that will be sent out with everything else. We're setting all that stuff up right now, so you'll hear more of that. But the point of that is to get input from folks. So we've got a couple of proposal ideas, right, Ramel, and then we're going to see like what's going to be the most useful thing, or what could be the most useful things that for communities in the context of stormwater and trash. And this is something that NAMSA is very interested in. We're working with ASTM to develop stormwater trash capture standards, and this is where the STEP program may start with solid waste and stormwater trash capture. So this is something that's really right in our wheelhouse, in the area of interest, and appreciate the work that Ramel's done, and thanks for taking time to share that. So last but not least, Chris, I know you don't have any slides, so I don't know if you want to give a little bit of background where you're coming from, and in the meantime, I'll get the slides pulled up to move forward.
Certainly. Thanks, Seth, and thanks to my EPA colleagues for kind of setting the stage and letting me go last here. My name is Chris Impellitteri. I'm the Associate National Program Director for the Office of Research and Development's Water Research Program. Over the past decade, most of our stormwater research has focused on urban issues and conversion of vacant, abandoned urban space. Alongside of that, urban soils analysis, because soils in urban areas are quite often not anywhere near what you would call a soil in a classic geochemical sense. We also focused a lot of our work on models and tools, things like the stormwater management model and the National Stormwater Calculator to help people plan for implementing stormwater management projects. And then also a lot of work in the area of life cycle evaluation. What are the O&M issues when it comes to things like green infrastructure implementation? We're right smack in the middle of our research planning process for the fiscal years 23 through 26. And we've really adjusted, I think, our tack when it comes to stormwater. As Dave Smith alluded to, looking at stormwater as a resource rather than a nuisance when and where we can. So along those lines, we've done a fair amount of work over the last year, developed a state of the science report for enhanced aquifer recharge using stormwater that's available to the public on the internet. Honestly, the easiest way to get to it is to Google it rather than to try to get through the EPA website. And then also a lot of research focused on enhanced aquifer recharge using stormwater in a sole source aquifer in Oklahoma. A sole source aquifer is, there's approximately 77-ish, I've lost count of what the current count is, but there's approximately 77 sole source aquifers in the United States, and they're defined as providing at least 50% of the drinking water supply to a service area where there are no decent alternative sources of water. So again, we're readjusting and trying to look more at stormwater as a resource. And in addition to enhanced aquifer recharge, we have research that involves analyzing the water quality at building scales, for example, for non-potable reuse at the building scale, whether that's cistern collection in the Virgin Islands or Puerto Rico, or non-potable irrigation uses in the city of San Francisco. There's three broad research areas that we're looking at when it comes to stormwater. And one is to continue our work in looking at green infrastructure effectiveness. There's still a lot of unknowns to help municipalities actually move forward with implementing green infrastructure, or some hybrid of green and gray infrastructure. What are the ancillary benefits of green infrastructure? Things like urban tree space, canopy space. Can these green infrastructure practices actually help with things like urban heat island effects? Another aspect we're looking at are climate impacts, and particularly climate change. How resilient are our stormwater management practices right now when we project changes in climate out 10, 20 years? We're also looking at water quality issues in stormwater, particularly road salts, plastics. As Ramel alluded to, those are a big problem in stormwater. but also specific chemical compounds. And I'll use one example, and that's 6-PPD quinone. 6-PPD is actually an additive to tires to help prevent degradation from interaction with ozone. The breakdown product of that, the quinone, the 6-PPD quinone, it turns out is quite deadly to salmon. So we're going to be looking at implementation of techniques and strategies to try to minimize the release of this and other contaminants into surface waters. And then the last area that we're really focusing on is monitoring and managing green infrastructure and stormwater management practices. So not only looking at helping folks look at the costs and the benefits of different strategies for stormwater management, but also providing models and tools to avoid unintended consequences. And I know, Seth, we have met with you as well as GWPC and the National Groundwater Association, and are well aware of your concerns when it comes to groundwater. If we use green infrastructure, for example, that infiltrates into the ground, what are the impacts or what are the consequences to that receiving groundwater aquifer? So that gives you a very rough overview. I'd be happy to talk with folks. My door is always open. Seth, you know where to find me. And lastly, before I move on a related note, we work closely with DoD on stormwater research in the Department of Defense. And I just wanted to let you and everybody know that there is a new request for proposals that's coming out of the Strategic Environmental Research and Development Program. I always had to remember that. I always have to write that down because I always refer to it as CERDIT. But CERDIT does have a proposal or request for proposals out that's entitled Improved Management of Stormwater Impacts at DoD Facilities. And those pre-proposals will be due January 6th, I believe, in 2022. So that's an opportunity to get some more research done with DoD as well.
Excellent. Thanks, Chris. And again, thanks to everybody at EPA. We have a couple questions that have come in. I did want to bounce them off you. We don't have time to go through everything, but unsurprisingly, there's a lot of questions about Lisa about the bipartisan bill, and we're going to hear about that in a second. But is there? I know that it's all very new. Is there any kind of way to ballpark is it a matter of 6 months, or how long is it going to take before there's a little more clarity on how things are going to roll out? Because obviously EPA is dealing with, I think it's $60 billion that EPA is dealing with, and I think 51 has gone to water programs. So there's a lot of stuff you guys got to deal with in terms of trying to set up programs and get the money out to the communities. And we're engaged, like you said, we're engaged with Michael Dean and others. But just it's kind of curious if there's any kind of understanding, because the money starts to flow 2022, right? That's what at least that's what the budgets show. So is there a way? I know that we're not trying to hold you to it. I think it's just more of a, plus or minus kind of idea of how quickly this might go. And because I think folks are, and we're interested or concerned about missing the boat if. We just certainly don't want that to happen. So any thoughts on that big picture wise?
I can tell you that people are moving rapidly, and their focus is very much on, it's very hard to get anything unrelated to this on anybody's agenda right now. That kind of lets you know that at very high levels in the agency, they're very focused on doing this right. And so I know that they're moving quickly. A lot of the money will get channeled through the SRF program, the way it's set up. And so they are rapidly moving to, update guidance that they have to give to the states to make it comply with the law. And so I know they're working quickly, but nobody's told me when something will roll out specifically. But I think within a few months, they're trying to finalize that guidance because they want to be ready so people can hit the ground running in January. So they're moving quickly, but that's the best I can do as far as timing goes. And a lot of there's a lot of figuring out still to do.
Okay, all right, I got it. Now I understand that I know that there's not much you can say. It was just more of is it going to be June before we figure this out? I think it's going to have to be before that point, is my guess. That's kind of what we're talking about. And Robin, just real quickly, and then we got to move on. Does you mentioned technical assistance Is there a timing on that, or is there, what's the best way to get involved with that? Is that just information you can send the link that we can send along to others, and is there, you said that's going on through September of 2022, is that correct? Is there an application period that people need to know about?
Great questions. So yeah, I did put the link in the chat, and that web page sends you to how you can get the technical assistance. Right now, it's extremely flexible. You email Evan Kirk or Ellen Kohler at the Environmental Finance Centers. Their email is in that link, and we have established office hours. And so those office hours are, you give them a call or you email them, and then you set up a time to talk, and then they help you. It's pretty simple, and it is available now until September 2022.
Excellent. Okay. Well, thank you very much. There's more to go over, but we want to move on because we got other stuff to cover. Greatly appreciate everybody at EPA taking time, preparing remarks, and again, I want folks to know out in our membership and beyond, just to see how much is going on in EPA and stormwater, and I think that's only going to increase over time, especially with the with the infrastructure bill and all the funding behind that. I think we're only going to see more and more of a focus on stormwater. And if not, then we will be bugging Lisa all the time about it and others. So thanks a lot, everybody. And we're going to move on to the next agenda item, which is focusing now on we've talked about it several times, the bipartisan, our guest speakers. We're going to focus first on the bipartisan infrastructure bill. And we were going to have Steve Dye, if Steve's available at this point. I think you are. Hey, Steve.
I am.
And Shannon Freed. I don't know if Shannon's on. She's with Senator Cardin's office. I don't know if Shannon's checked in yet. I know she had a couple of things that were challenging in her schedule. So Shannon, if you're there. Oh, there you are. Great.
I am.
I didn't see it pop up here. So. I know we're running a little bit behind, but we built in some time on the backside. So feel free to opine and share with us all the exciting news. So Shannon, I guess if you want to go first, one maybe give your background and let folks know what's going on.
Yes, that would be great. Thank you, Seth. I'm Shannon Freedy. I serve as Environmental Policy Counsel to Senator Cardin. He's the senior senator for Maryland. He's my senator. I'm a resident of Baltimore. He's the senior member of the Environment Public Works Committee and chairman of its subcommittee on transportation and infrastructure. And I'd like to thank Dr. Brown and NAMSA for hosting this discussion today, and each of you for your interest in this panel. It's an exciting time here on the Hill, I think particularly for me, given how congressional interest in expanding federal funding for local drinking water and wastewater infrastructure has increased in recent years, and particularly this one. So recent legislation is focused on affordability issues, as well as creating new grant programs to address specific objectives, as well as increasing funding for existing programs for certain types of projects, including stormwater management projects. At the same time, we've seen appropriations for federal financial assistance programs increasing in recent years, and that includes the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, the Clean Water SRF, which we'll talk about more in detail. So the sort of bill of the hour is the Infrastructure, Jobs, and Investment Act, often referred to as BIF. That's Bipartisan Infrastructure Framework. That was kind of its working title over the summer that sort of stuck. Also may hear EJA is the actual title. President Biden signed that into law this week, and it authorizes numerous infrastructure programs, but specifically $3 billion in new federal stormwater funding, roughly $600 million per year over 5 years, which I'm going to talk through just a brief history of the bill and then highlight some provisions. I think there's probably too many to get through them all, which I would categorize as a good problem. So just starting with how we got here, the clean water title in that package started out as the Senate passed Drinking Water and Wastewater Infrastructure Act of 2021. That passed the Senate in August. In August, the Senate passed the larger bipartisan infrastructure framework that included a Division E, Title II, for those following along in their bill text. So that includes those provisions in that original bill, Senate Bill 914. And to wind the tape back a little further, a lot of those provisions in S914 were actually included in legislation reported out of EPW in May 2020. So any grays that you see, I'm attributing directly to that, but it was absolutely worth it. The bill provides appropriations of nearly $15 billion over 5 years for the Clean Water SRF. And so those provide below market rate loans and grants to fund water infrastructure improvements. Kind of a significant feature of this bill is that 49% of the funding will be administered as grants and forgivable loans, which is different from the usual split of lower no interest financing. So that is significant. And these increases are on top of that baseline, which has hovered around 1.6 billion annually. So that's almost 1.5 times higher. So this is significant. However, we know that our stormwater needs are large and they're growing, and they're not the only thing that the Clean Water SRF funds, since it's often funding wastewater projects also, treatment plant upgrades. For 2021, the American Society of Civil Engineers scored stormwater as a sector specifically, and it received a score of a D. So we know that there are a number of investments needed, and that kind of brings us to this focus kind of sort of new programs targeting specific needs. So I'll talk through a couple of those. One to highlight is section, it's 5203, and that amends an existing Clean Water Act pilot program for something called alternative water source projects, and will now newly include stormwater as an eligible project type, and that authorized 25 million per year, and that 5-year window is fiscal year 22 to 2026. We have many examples in Maryland of local leaders using these practices. Howard County has been using reclaimed water in a variety of activities, things like irrigation, dust control, concrete, basically those non-potable uses, and able to reduce their footprint, which is excellent. The bill also amends the existing sewer overflow and stormwater reuse municipal grants, which are a mouthful, sometimes referred to as OSG. That's an EPA program, but what's new is now eligible to fund projects that are notification systems to inform the public of sewer overflows, which is significant. Thinking about some of these extreme rate events we're experiencing, it also boosted appropriations to 280 million annually for each of those 5 years, and directs states to use not less than a quarter of them in rural and financially distressed communities. And that's sort of a theme, that thread really runs throughout the bill in terms of sort of prioritizing or targeting some of these underinvested communities. So what's also interesting about this program is it was originally created in 2000 and received appropriations for the first time in 2019 at 28 million for FY20, and then almost doubled, 40 million for 2021. And the EPA issued a proposed rule regarding the program last summer. So really exciting to see this program underway. It's been a long time coming and likely to offer a lot of good opportunities for those stormwater programs. And I think turning to another new program, this is section 5217, which directs EPA to establish a grant program to support new centers of excellence for stormwater control infrastructure technologies. This could be housed at research institutions, I think universities, or by nonprofits, and provides annual appropriations for those to establish those, as well as grants for the agency to provide to state, local, tribal governments to carry out stormwater infrastructure projects. And I think what this is really sort of targeting these new and emerging technologies, and this is an area where Maryland has been a leader. Efforts considered some of the most innovative anywhere. This is an example in Prince George's County. The Maryland Clean Water Partnership is a community-based public-private partnership, and really kind of serves as a model for this innovative financing. And it is intended to really finance a large-scale urban stormwater green infrastructure retrofit. And that project is really meant to meet the requirements of the Chesapeake Bay TMDL, it's the total maximum daily load, which is often referred to as the pollution diet, for reducing nutrient pollution in the Bay watershed, huge priority of the senators, and that MS4 permit requires the county to retrofit about 15,000 acres of impervious surface by 2025, so the next 4 years. That's estimated to cost over $1 billion. So the ability to pull in those partners to get that done is really significant. And I think that thinking through our interest in stormwater, I think we are often mindful of the Chesapeake Bay as a really engine for the regional economy, and we know that stormwater is sort of 1/3 of the sort of three-piece pie. Thinking about stormwater, wastewater, and agriculture as sources of nutrient pollution. And we know that stormwater is increasing. It's not the largest, but it's also growing, and we want to see those loads coming down. So ways that we can get at that, I think, are often really significant. And I think a related priority, thinking about dealing with the increasing volume of stormwater, often a concern we have is making sure that it's managed as a driver of affordability. So there are two authorizations within the bill I just want to touch on that sort of grew out of bipartisan standalone legislation that the senator authored. One is the Rural and Low Income Water Assistance Pilot Program, and that requires EPA to establish a grant program to provide household drinking water and wastewater to include stormwater rate assistance based on the result of a needs assessment. So these sorts of uses would be kind of direct assistance, lifeline rates, bill discounting, special hardship provisions, sort of ways to get customers on a path to repayment to make sure that that debt is kind of sustainable by the utility, and that the needs assessment can really help us key in on where water is most unaffordable for customers. And that, again, Senators Cardin and Roger Wicker of Mississippi originally introduced bipartisan legislation to support low-income families in affording water and sewer bills and stormwater bills in the low-income water customer assistance programs in 2017, and again in 2019. So really happy to see pieces of that included in this bill. And then sort of a related priority, again, both the driver of affordability and also something we see impacted by climate change is really the need for resilience, making sure that our water infrastructure systems are able to withstand some of the adverse impacts we're seeing. So this would add a section to the Clean Water Act directing EPA to establish a resilience and sustainability grant. This would be sort of a kind of a companion expansion of an existing drinking water program. And these are projects that can enhance that resilience to climate change, including green infrastructure. So that would receive $25 million annually is the authorized level. And that is, again, that I think is key to resilience, which is one of our goals for the Chesapeake Bay Watershed Agreement. Those are the kind of shared goals of the 6 watershed states. And Senators Cardin and now ranking member Capito of West Virginia, who's a member of that watershed delegation, co-authored bipartisan bill. That is the kind of the start of that. So I think I'll just turn now briefly to some of the pieces kind of outside that Division E in the bill, because the framework includes both the some of the water infrastructure authorization as well as the surface transportation title, and we know of that nexus with stormwater from our highway infrastructure. So there are a couple provisions, one directing the Transportation Research Board, TRB, to conduct a study of stormwater impacts and make recommendations for BMPs, best management practices, really intended to kind of capture recent advancements in technologies. Sort of a similar provision directs the Department of Transportation to update and reissue guidance that has really started to become outdated. There's examples from 1997, 2014. So sort of working to bring those up to date and offer that guidance to states and localities. And then one new program that I find exciting is one called the Healthy Streets Program. So this is a new discretionary grant to for entities to deploy things like cool pavements, porous pavements, and expand tree cover. And the intent here is to really mitigate heat islands in urban centers. We know that within Maryland, Baltimore has ranked highly in some indexes of where do we see cities getting hottest, which is certainly an equity concern. So I think the goal is there to, again, not only kind of reduce that heat island effect, but also improve air quality, reduce impervious surfaces, and reduce stormwater runoff. So it should be some good opportunities there as that program is stood up. And I think that wanting to sort of turn from the framework, which is often messaged as sort of a significant first step in the Build Back Better agenda. And I think this is particularly true of water. It sort of isn't just the rhetoric around the need to do more, but it's also about how these two packages are sequenced. So what the Build Back Better Act does in some provisions is it authorizes appropriations, but those often receive those appropriations in the Build Back Better Act, kind of that second piece, roughly kind of cashing the check that's authorized in the Build Back Better Act. So I think that that is significant because having that funding available immediately rather than waiting for that annual appropriation cycle can allow an implementation to happen more quickly. For just within the Environment and Public Works Committee, which has jurisdiction over the EPA, in the Senate, it received an instruction of $67 billion under the budget resolution for FY22. And that resolution kind of makes some assumptions as far as what the committee can use it for. It's ultimately up to the members, but some of those expectations include water infrastructure and environmental justice, and really picking up some of those pieces that are authorized in that framework. Just a couple examples. The Build Back Better Act, I think, popped up late October, early November, and that funds both the alternative water source project grants touched on at $125 million, and the sewer overflow and stormwater reuse municipal grants at that $1.85 billion to invest in those projects, particularly in financially distressed communities. So I think that's examples where that kind of makes that second piece so critical, and obviously the subject to ongoing debate right now. And I think sort of a parallel or kind of important phase to be mindful of also will be implementation, which we seem to kind of touch on at the end of the last discussion, right? As members of Congress are going to be communicating the needs of their constituencies to agencies as they implement the enacted legislation. There's often there are opportunities for public participation through rulemakings, for notice and comments. So really looking for those opportunities to make sure that those programs, fit the needs that we have, and that's why that your experiences as managers are so significant, and all those data needs, getting some of those met through the bill are so helpful. So I think that is all that I had hoped to share with you this afternoon. Fortunately, I have to turn to another event, but I really appreciate Seth accommodating my schedule, but I'll work to get my contact available to follow up with any questions and have that in the chat. I think we'll work to see if the so-called Thursday night magic helps move along the defense authorization. But anyhow, really appreciate your attention, and I hope you have a great holiday season and a great week.
Thanks, Shannon. Thanks for sharing all that great information. Thanks for all the work, and thanks for being a champion too for stormwater on the Hill and being a partner with us. So we don't take it for granted.
All right, thank you both.
Thanks. And Steve, is there anything else you want to you add to?
Honestly, did such an awesome job. I don't know.
I know. She's very comprehensive.
I wish she was still on. I could say again, thank you to her. She's a unicorn, and Senator Cardin's a unicorn. They're really exceptional, and they really do a lot to advance the interests of stormwater on Capitol Hill. So we're very lucky to have their support. Seth and I do a lot of talking to other offices and going around the House and Senate, but when things need to get done, it's really Cardin and Shannon who step up a lot. So it's a lot of credit goes to them. And the one thing she did miss in one of her comments about the Build Back Better plan that's currently being negotiated right now, it also includes $225 million for that low-income ratepayer assistance program that Shannon mentioned was part of the BIF, which will help actually for low-income ratepayers who are struggling to pay their drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater bills. It'll give them assistance. And just actually yesterday, the IRS ruled that there was some questions and concerns that individuals who receive that assistance would have to receive a 1099 from the utility, because the utility was going to be the pass-through for that assistance. The money was going to go from the federal government to the states, and the states were going to be awarding grants to the utilities, and the utilities were going to be awarding that assistance to low-income ratepayers. And there was a concern that 1099s would have to be issued by the utilities because it was a form of income, essentially.
Right.
But the IRS ruled that that's not going to be the case. So that's very good too. So we're hopeful that the Build Back Better plan includes that money for that $225 million, includes the increased funding for the OSG program, increased funding for the alternative source water program, which would go towards stormwater recovery and aquifer recharge through stormwater. She really kind of nailed everything there very well. The one thing also I don't think she mentioned was that Clean Water Shed Needs Survey will also receive funding as part of the BIF. And that is something we've been working hard on for a long time too, is to make sure that when EPA does that needs survey, they capture better data about our national stormwater infrastructure needs. So that's, otherwise, I mean, she covered all of the really important stuff there. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I know you're short on time though, Seth, so you can move on to.
Yeah, well, I think that I just wanted to state a couple things too, that I think the stormwater planning and implementation grants is something that I don't know if that was mentioned, but that's something that it's only $50 million, but it's a starting point, and I think that's that's for this, all this adds up is the point. So we're interested in that. We're also interested in, she mentioned the centers of excellence. And so that's something that's been in legislation for like 10 years in different forms or another, right? So to finally see a lot of these things that have been in Congresses over and over again actually happen is really unbelievable. It's kind of hard to get your head wrapped around at this point, really. And folks who are not doing this and don't do this all the time, I mean, there's so much effort and time that's put into this, and like Steve said, having a champion like Shannon and like Senator Cardin and others, but they're really they've been the point people for us when getting information into legislative text. It's really it's been really rewarding. So, and again, all my Steve is the person who's really riding. He's the one who guides us all when it comes to Capitol Hill. So greatly appreciate WEF's support and Steve's support specifically. So it's you're just as much of a unicorn as anyone else, Steve. I also note that Shannon has her she provided her email address in the chat function. If you can't see that, again, we'll provide information on all of this in the email that goes out after the fact. So. And then we're hopefully going to be doing more of this for in April when we have our policy event focused on stormwater, along with WEF and NAMSA together, which we've done every year for the last 5-6 years, and ends up in things like this. So anyway, thanks a lot, Steve. Greatly appreciate everything that you do and for taking time to share your unicorn-like wisdom with all of us. So. Okay, last but not least, we're gonna move over to James Stitt, and we're gonna hear about how things. And James, you've got your own. I'm sorry, I should have sent this to you. Are you ready for me to send the? Let me see here.
Yes, by all means, Seth, please do.
Okay, there you go. Sorry, I forgot that I had your slides, but you've got your own slides. And James, while you're doing that, and setting that up, I just want to mention that there's something I didn't mention. I did want to mention before we were done here is that WEF is involved with the Water Research Foundation. I'm thinking about the Water Research Action Plan that Dave Smith talked about. we're actually part of a team with the WRF to focus on stormwater capture and use. There is a survey that's available that's out there. We're trying to gather information from different folks. I'm going to send out the link for that, again, with all the information that we're going to send out to everybody. But just be aware of that, and that's going to be closing soon. I just wanted to give everyone a heads up for that. So anyway, if James, if you want to take it away, then you got about 15, 18 minutes, something like that, whatever. And just so folks know that, are you having a tough time getting into your screen?
I'm not sure why it's not working for me here. Worked earlier.
Yeah, it worked earlier. So as James tries to figure this out, I'll just say that where we kind of ran across, James and I have known each other for a long time. He's a stormwater guy, and he's been there since day one. But he gave a form of this presentation at the recent series of webinars that NOAA put on that focused on all sorts of aspects of climate change, modeling, projections, and things like that. And James I think you were part of the last of 5 webinars that was out there. So yeah. It was such a good webinar. We thought that would be something else to share here. So.
Do you have it now, Seth? Because it's show me here that the audience can see the screen. So.
Oh, you want me to pull it up? I can do that here.
I don't know. I mean, it's telling me that on my screen that I am sharing. So.
You are sharing. No, you are sharing. Great. So okay, yeah, great. It's not in the full size, but we can still see.
Yeah,
it.
Let me switch over to full screen for you.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought you no. Okay. You're good to go. Good. No, go for it, man. Go for it.
All right. Awesome. Thank you, Seth. I appreciate the opportunity here. Let me bump back one. Appreciate the opportunity to talk to you folks here, and appreciate Seth saving me for the final position here, putting me between everyone and the end of their day. But I'll try to get through this as quickly and concisely as possible for y'all. Like many other cities in our region and across the country, Pittsburgh is in such a situation with our stormwater that we're relying on old infrastructure that was built back at the beginning of the last century, when the biggest infrastructure investments were probably made in our history. So hopefully now with the new legislation, we'll see another round of that we can build for the future. But like many cities, this is how things were done. And like many cities, this is what we looked like back then at that time when those were constructed. Relatively, condensed and centralized in one location. But as over the last 120 years, we've certainly grown and spread out as our city has developed even further and grown into the hillsides and expanded with our impervious areas and the runoff that we generate. And as we've grown over those years, so too changes have developed in the storm patterns that we see. Using national as well as local data that we've collected from NOAA and our local county and regional offices on rainfall amounts, we see that we're looking at significant increases in especially those heavy precipitation events that we've all been experiencing. So it's not just sort of anecdotally, hey, storms seem a little different than they used to. When you look at the data, it backs it up, and by all accounts, we are trying to manage something that is much more different than what our sewer systems were designed for. The sewer systems we have were designed they do handle the storm flows when it's a relatively light rains. And much of our system, about 1,200 miles that we have in the ground, 25% of it is approximately over 100 years old. So it was built for the storms that we had back then, not for the storm systems we're getting today with these more intense, localized, severe storms cloudburst events that we tend to see. And overall, we've lacked a general stormwater strategy in our city and this region, in fact. So our legislative and regulatory systems on the local level here were not designed to, help us with the stormwater as it is. The stormwater codes were sort of an ad hoc assemblage throughout our local ordinance that, as needs came up, somebody would insert something to cover that need and to create a regulatory guidance for development and city growth. It became something, a lot of contradictions and a lot of issues associated with that. This chart that you see here on the lower right is a flow chart that we tried to actually define the process of getting a land use and land improvement permits and stormwater reviews in the city. I think after the 65th or 66th option box there, we kind of gave up. But this is what we're dealing with. So we knew we had to make some changes. And throughout the years, we have learned a few things. We've begun to develop a stormwater strategy in our area that never existed before. And first and foremost, out of that, we sort of come to the conclusion that stormwater is in fact a land use issue. It's not something that we can just sort of do on its own. We have to look at all of our zoning and land use development. We cannot manage the stormwater to meet our regulatory compliance with our state and federal issued permits in all of our right-of-ways. We need partnerships with the private development to better manage stormwater on those sites as well. And also that this is a climate change related issue, that we are faced with a very different set of needs when these storms hit the way that they have been in recent history. So as we focus on that, we started to look at how do these trends in the changing precipitation impact what we do with our code and things that we can control locally as far as setting the metrics for our regulatory ordinance and code for new development. One of the things we did was we initiated this code update project was that we were going to consolidate all of our stormwater content that was scattered throughout the code into one place. We knew that there was it was very difficult to find all of the regulations for stormwater throughout the code. So we created a brand new Title 13 that did not exist prior to this update to house all of those codes and moved everything over to that. As you might expect, because this code was sort of scattershot, there were conflicts and overlap in different titles throughout the zoning code, building code, plumbing code, etc. So we addressed those and eliminated that and wanted to develop new resources for the folks that use the code from in day to day, in our agencies and departments across the city. So we're created a companion piece to the new updates for city code that is a stormwater design manual that is also accompanying the PWSA developers guide that we already have in place. And we try to improve our process for this land use and stormwater development plan reviews and plan approvals. Because in the past, it was sort of very difficult for folks who, not only the regulated folks who were trying to respond to what the requirements were, but also for the folks who needed to enforce these regulations to fully understand them. So the plan review, inspection, and enforcement processes were all revamped throughout this process as well. What we included in this and what really want to focus on here today is the climate change requirements in our policies and how we incorporated a forward-looking view of rainfall expectations for the future into our code, as opposed to using historical data and looking backwards to determine our code. So the first of the two requirements that we utilize in volume control and rate controls, volume control, we use the 95th percentile rain event for the 2100 year storm event, proposing that the new development capture and provide water quality treatment on their sites for the projected storm events for the 95th percentile that would be in the year 2100. We got this number from our local RAND Corporation Office study that was also done in conjunction with Carnegie Mellon University. We're very fortunate to have these two organizations here working with us locally to take the global climate models that they can get their hands on and downscale those to the Pittsburgh local regional level as far as what our expectations for future climate change projections might be over the next 80 years. We used their report to feed into our analysis for the metrics that we created in our codes for that 95th percentile for the year 2100 for volume controls. And then the rate controls is our second requirement, and that uses those future projected design storms for 2100 to limit peak flows from new development. And our intent here was to limit the peak flows during that first sort of 15-minute, downpour flush to protect the downstream sewer system and reduce basement backups and localized flooding that we see so significantly during those early stages of these storm events. And that was using the NOAA Atlas 14 pre-development rate for the 2-year storm had to be the same as the post-development 2100 10-year storm event. I'll talk a little bit more about those in the next couple of slides, but that first volume control, the 95th percentile, our increase on that went from just below 1.4 inches for the 95th percentile rain event locally here up to a 1.66 in 2100. And the way we reached that was by simply looking at our historical data, at our local rain gauges, and seeing the trend line, as you can see here in the dotted red, that increases over time by approximately about 13% over the last 75 years. So we sort of took that same trend and calculated it out to 2100 to give us that 95th percentile at 1.66 for future climate projected years. Using that storm estimate, we wanted to also see how that would affect, sort of the return rates on 2, 5, 10, et cetera, different various storm event sizes. And so we used the climate models from Carnegie Mellon and RAND, and these were specifically, as I said, downscaled for the Pittsburgh region. And we used these to come up with sort of the average rainfall. And you can see the changes here, the NOAA Atlas Atlas 14 current information in the green column there with the projected 2100 average future rainfall inches for those various storms. It's not such an increase on the smaller level storms, but when you get up into the 50-year and 100-year events, we see quite a significant jump, as you might expect. The other sort of reinforcement we used when we were establishing these numbers to sort of justify our results was to look at other cities. There aren't a whole lot of other cities that have, at the time, this was all done about a year ago when we started doing this evaluation. There are a few more now I know that have done this, but a lot of them were not available at that time and were not codified. The ones we did find, we saw either a flat rate like in Virginia Beach where they just went 20% up across the board, or others who used climate projection models that were downscaled, like Auckland, New Zealand, or even Vancouver, British Columbia, that used fluctuating rates there across the storms. So these various cities were, not too far off if you look at the numbers we're projecting from what others were getting, which sort of gave us a little bit of reassurance there on that as well. One thing we also did, in addition to the climate change requirements, is we knew that there was a need in some of our watersheds to go above and beyond what the climate change increases would give us in our rate controls. So we specifically focused on our sort of most egregious offenders when it comes to overflows and basement backups and street flooding, and identified these flood-prone watersheds in our existing sewer model, and also used flooding complaint database numbers to identify where the most need was for rate controls. Based on this analysis, we put in a public health and safety release rate policy that comes in on top of the climate change policies. And so any development in these areas would need to meet an additional requirement that if the climate change increase in rate release rate was not at this level, you would have to bump it up to matching your 10-year post-construction to the two-year pre-construction event release rates in those areas. So certainly, one of the biggest questions we had was, oh, you're going to make us do more, so what's it going to cost us? So we did a significant amount of cost analysis on this process and what the additional sizing and additional management of stormwater on development sites would, how it would impact the budget of a development project. We used the 10,000 square foot, 1 acre and 5 acre site as our sort of delineations. These are, sort of very similar to what we see coming across our planning reviews in 10,000 square feet for these small infill developments, the 1 acre, medium-sized development, or the 5 acre large-scale developments. We ran the requirements for the rainfall regulations and the proposed climate change regulations for all three of these scenarios and tried to calculate what the increase in storage volume would be that they would need to meet, as well as then what the reflective cost would be. You can see here that the storage volume increase across the board for any of those sites is roughly about 36% more. Now that number doesn't necessarily match the numbers we saw in the 2-year, 5-year, 10-year, 100-year, increased controls, but this is a peak rate number here, so this would be the maximum that we would need them to control for that larger event. Cost difference for a lot of the folks on these sites, certainly a small scale site, the differential is going to be a greater percentage of the overall budget, but still not a whole lot more money when you look at the general scale of a per acre cost. When you're looking at, many of these developments are up in the, multiple millions of dollars. We're talking, between $20,000 and $40,000 additional cost for upsizing the stormwater management to meet our new requirements. We thought that was a relatively modest amount, and after talking with a lot of the developers and contractors and construction and engineering firms in the region who do this work, they, sort of come to agree that, this, although increased costs they were not happy with, that this was a lot more palatable than what I think they expected when they first heard that this was coming down the pike. So the public health and safety release rate that we added on top of the climate change does add another couple more bucks to the cost of controlling the rate as it comes off the sites. For the smaller sites, there was no additional cost that would have been necessary, and the larger sites did have an incremental increase. But we again felt that this was not overly burdensome to the development community, given that the benefit of having these additional capacity and additional rate controls would significantly reduce our downstream flooding and our downstream basement backups in these specific neighborhoods where we've gotten a lot of complaints and a lot of localized flooding that impacts traffic flow and health and safety. One of the other things that we did offer that was, to help this be a lot more palatable to the development community is there are ways for them to get credits and sort of incentives to do more stormwater management on their sites, getting, expedited plan approvals if they increase their capacity to certain levels, and getting density bonuses for additional capacity and management on site. And those were all sort of come to us as we talked to them at our stakeholder meetings to develop this program and the code changes to try and make this as useful to them as we could, as well as getting most stormwater management out of the private development sector so that we could meet our targets as well. I do want to say thanks, shout out to Tom Petroni at AKRF. They were our technical consultants and provided much of the detailed data analysis and the justification for our changes in our stormwater code. And they did a great job of handling all of that for us. And there's a couple of references here if you want to look at some of the report and the climate models that we used for our justifications there from RAND and the folks over at DOI. So I appreciate the time, and I'll throw it back to Seth, and happy to answer any questions that folks may have. Left.
Well, first of all, let me just say that there's no such, when we say last but not least, I really mean it here, because that was a really cool presentation. And I think it's kind of a pathway for where we're going to be going in the future for communities to understand. We talk a lot about climate change, but what does that mean when it comes to specific design parameters, right? And then how does that, I mean, you've shown that pathway, and that's, because I mean, I have heard about like Virginia Beach just tacking on 20%, and then we've engaged with the National Weather Service and NOAA and others who put together Atlas 14, and we've been trying to get that to be done at across the country and updated every 10 years as a policy thing. So we see the value in that, but that does not do future projections, correct? That does, here's statistical based analysis based upon recent past information on storm depths and precipitation information, but it doesn't look forward. So how do you do that? And what we've heard is that oftentimes states or communities will just say, we'll just tack on 20%. It's kind of a rule of thumb. This provides a much better way, it's not just, why does that be 20%? What's, you've shown the pathway to actually quantify this, which is great. It's really helpful.
Yeah, and I also have to credit, the folks over at RAND, Jordan Fishbaugh, and the people at Carnegie Mellon University. We started this study looking at this in 2018, 2019. And really, we're wondering, like, how are we going to downscale these giant, global climate models that are out there, and get it to a point where, they're going to accept it and feel justified, and that their numbers are accurate, that it's not just a swag.
Exactly.
So, we were very fortunate that they came out with their study at the time that they did, as we were developing this and working on this, and we helped them by providing data for the model of our sewer systems and our other aspects of our stormwater management in the city, and they were very generous and very helpful in getting the downscale model information back to us and helping us figure this out.
And then that term downscale, for folks who don't know, that's taking these global models and making it local, making it something that you can use locally, right? And that's a term that we're hearing more and more of, and there's a need for communities to say, well, you can have these global models, but that doesn't help me. So being able to downscale it to a local context is really what is needed at the community level, right?
Yeah, when we look at the global models that are coming out of like COP and the other IPCC, they're giving us like the Eastern United States regional model, right. Which, North Carolina and Pittsburgh do not have the same rain. Florida and Maine do not have the same rain. And we, as we've heard, and many people have also attested to, the storms are very different. They're very localized. I mean, even in the city of Pittsburgh, we have somebody in the South Hills calling us and complaining that their basement's flooding. Meanwhile, people on the east end of town are out playing baseball in the field because it's still sunny out and nobody's seeing anything. It's
This is what makes our field so exciting and
Yeah,
challenging.
that's exactly.
Hey, one quick question, and then we got to wrap up because we're over time. But this was such a great presentation. We didn't want to stop that. There was a question about asking if PWSA, the stormwater design manual that you mentioned, has that been published or is it still yet to be finalized?
That has yet to be finalized. Our stormwater code updates were just approved in October and signed by the mayor at the end of the month. The stormwater design guide, which is the accompanying document, will be released in January or February, and then the actual code is going into effect in March. So the code was approved, but the effective date is March. So we have a little bit of time to develop our manual here, which we're working on right now in its final stages. So as soon as that's available, it will be available publicly through the city websites and such, and through the PWSA information.
That's great. One last quick question is the downscaled model that you guys are using. Does that produce? Because we got a comment here about it's important to get that downscaled information down to the 15-minute or at least hourly type of time period. Or time steps. Is that what you guys did, or do you have any information on that? Just briefly.
That's something I can't answer. I'd have to go back and take a look at the details of the model. I can't say for sure. But knowing Jordan and the team over there at RAND, I am certain that it is probably as detailed a resolution as they can possibly
be.
muster.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I was assuming too. Okay, great. Okay, well, just so you know, we still have 150 people on. We started with 200. So if you feel like being last was, short shrift,
well,
it was not like that.
Thank everybody for sticking with me.
Well, it was a great presentation, great topic, and thanks for everybody who joined us and stayed with us the whole time. We're gonna wrap things up now, and we're gonna be back next year, and we'll have other webinars throughout this year. Thanks again, James. Appreciate your input.
Thanks, Seth.
Okay, see you, everybody. Thank you.